Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the top 5 things you need to look for when you're buying your first camera. Alright, let's jump right into it. Number 1 is autofocus. Autofocus on your cameras is extremely important. If your camera can't autofocus well, you're going to struggle a lot capturing good, high quality videos. You're going to constantly be switching between manual and auto, and when you're in manual you'll probably miss the focus point, and when you're in auto it just looks unprofessional because the focus keeps racking back and forth. So make sure that whatever camera you're buying has a dual pixel CMOS sensor. Those usually are the best autofocusing sensors available now in cameras, so any camera with that should do fine. Alright, moving on to number 2, and this one is important. Make sure that the camera you buy has interchangeable lenses, which means that you can remove your camera's lens and put on another one. A lot of beginners tend to, because they are on a budget, obviously go out and buy a camera with a fixed lens where the zooming is inbuilt on the camera. Make sure that it can change lenses, because if you put on like a nice wide prime lens on it, you can get some cinematic looking footage with it. Alright, moving on to number 3, and that is FPS, which is frames per second. Make sure that you have a minimum of 60 frames per second. Anything above that, great. When you buy a camera with 60 frames per second, that means that if you want to capture slow motion footage, you're going to get a lot more smoother looking footage with a higher frame rate. So the higher the frame rate, the better slow motion you get. So that's why at 60 frames is usually considered like the minimum standard for slow motion. Alright, moving on to number 4, and that is manual control. Ensure that whatever camera you're going for out there, make sure that you can manually set everything. So when you're buying it, make sure that they advertise, or usually in the description it tells you all about the camera. Make sure that it has manual control. You should be able to manually change the aperture, shutter speed, ISO, frame rate, everything. That's going to give you a much larger, much wider variety of things to do with it. If you learn to manually control your camera, operating higher end cameras will be much easier for you, because you already have practice with your low end camera and as a beginner, and learning to shoot manual is absolutely necessary, because you need to understand the balancing between aperture, ISO and shutter speed. We'll talk about that in another video, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Alright, and that's it. Moving on to number 5, the final one, and before I close this video, I'm going to give you a couple of camera options which I think are really good cameras for beginners out there. So number 5 is make sure that the camera you buy has film settings. Film settings usually are like microphone adjustments, frame rate, video quality, stuff like that. Some of the higher end even have aspect ratio options, but if you're on a budget, you're not going to get aspect ratio options on your camera. But you should be able to change the audio levels on your microphone, file size, stuff like that should all be easily accessible on your camera, and you should be able to manually control your film settings on your camera. So before we close, few cameras I recommend. Now, especially when you're buying a camera, keep this in mind, only buy Canon or Sony. Now, when it comes to Sony, you need to have a good budget. You need to have a decent budget when buying a Sony camera. Sony does have a wide variety of lenses, but they are on the deeper side of the swimming pool. That's not right. You know, I mean, they are on the pricier side of the chart. Okay. Now, when it comes to Canon, I much prefer Canon because they have a wide variety of lenses. You've got 35 mils, 50 mils. You've got like low-end Canon, and you've got like really expensive, like the L series lenses, which are all very expensive. But if you're going for a Canon, then either DSLR or mirrorless is fine. If your primary function for shooting with the camera is video, then definitely go for a mirrorless. It's compact, it processes everything much faster. Autofocusing is better because on a DSLR there's a mirror inside, right? So the image that's being fed into the camera bounces off the mirror and onto the sensor, whereas a mirrorless camera doesn't have a mirror. It's all being fed directly onto the sensor itself. So if you're going for a Canon, I would suggest starting from down low, the 200D Mark II, the Canon M50, the Canon 90D, and anything above that is perfect. Now, the 200D Mark II is like a worst case scenario. If you're really on a budget, go for that. The Canon M50 is slightly more decent, little better. It shoots 4K, but the 90D really is a step up, and that's probably the camera you should go for That's the best, the highest recommended, I would say. When it comes to Sony, Sony, all of their mirrorless have decent options, and it's really up to you with Sony to decide which camera you want. I have personally not much experience with Sony, so that's why I'm not gonna recommend any cameras. But with Canon, like I said, the 200D Mark II, the M50, and anything above the 90D. Of course, if you've got a nice big chunk of a budget, go for the EOS R. Oof, that camera. Alright guys, thanks for watching. That's it for this video. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.